this out loud, yeah? The police force that have been covering it up have now been given court orders to take every bit of footage that I got.
In a recent journalistic video, we explained why the Barrow authorities forced Mr. Robinson to hand over his footage concerning his Barrow interviews and reports. This is an effort to quash any misdirection from Mr. Robinson, as he's leaving a few holes in the narrative to sow seeds of conspiracies in ill-informed and poor-thinking minds. We suspect he's doing this deliberately. He's deliberately leaving holes in the narrative for his own purposes, which is his regular modus operandi.
The leader of Barrow Police come out and said that they haven't got Muslim gangs. Since then, they've charged 4 Muslims with historic allegations in Barrow. I actually knew about those cases before they've been reported now. I'd been investigating those same people. I'd found out that these gang people were active.
What Mr. Robinson does not tell you is the fact that the issue of the historic cases were not gang related. They were individual cases. Mr. Robinson would know all this. He would know that these were separate cases and they were well in the past. Thus, Barrow Police's recent year-long investigation, which was independently verified, found no evidence of any grooming gang activity in Barrow. That's quite correct on the Barrow Police's part. Mr. Robinson is being unfair when he's trying to use those historic cases against their investigation and their findings, which they released publicly.
Hello, my name's Dean Holden. I'm the Detective Chief Superintendent for Cumbria Constabulary. I'm doing this release today in response to some recent Facebook posts alleging serious... What I can say about this specific scenario is that Cumbria Constabulary have been undertaking an operational investigation for nearly 12 months now that's been dedicated at looking at specific allegations of abuse. That investigation has involved a dedicated investigative team, a senior investigating officer, and significant constabulary resources and finances committed to it. But what I can say is that investigation then was subjected to an independent peer review in March this year. That review was conducted by subject matter experts nationally, qualified and experienced in investigating abuse, physical violence. When the question is asked, is there an organised gang of Asian men in Barrow conducting abuse or otherwise exploitation against individuals, our investigation has shown that that has not been corroborated with otherwise evidence.
So that's disingenuous, Mr. Robinson. Now, nobody can say that we're part of the establishment. We're anti-establishment, but we've got to be honest. We're pro-truth against falsehood here. That's why we're speaking out. Mr. Robinson is either being disingenuous and spinning things with half-truths, which ultimately leads to a wholly false representation of facts, or he's just ignorant and he's speaking without knowledge. You decide which is the case here.
I actually knew about those cases before they've been reported now. I'd been investigating those same people. I'd found out that these gang people were active.
Well, if Mr. Robinson knew about the historic cases, then he clearly knew none of these historic cases were anything to do with Ellie Williams. As he's on record a number of months ago in that lame dialogue with Mr. Sa Ra Garvey, he said he does not believe Ellie Williams's Asian grooming gang's claims. That's on record. Have a look in the link below and you'll be able to listen to that.
There's a massive campaign called Justice for Ellie, a girl who says she's by lots of Muslim gangs. It's not actually the way I think the story goes. But
so Mr. Robinson either has a bad memory or he just spouts things off uncontrollably. His lack of control, his loose lips, are exactly what Barrow Police are worried about. They're concerned that he will release something which will affect Ellie Williams's right to a fair hearing. Remember, it's Miss Williams, and only Miss Williams, who is on charges of perversion of the course of justice. So the Barrow Police are trying to protect her interests, not the interests of some Asian grooming gang or some groomer. It's to protect her interests from Mr. Robinson's uncontrolled gob. There's a strong indication that Mr. Robinson deep down knows the historic cases in Barrow, the ones of individual Bangladeshi men. I think there were three or four, I'm not entirely sure, I'll have to double check. Now, they were not gang related. They're historic, but they were individual cases, and they had nothing to do with Miss Williams's Asian grooming gang claims. How we come to that conclusion that Mr. Robinson probably believes this is because he let slip that he does not believe Miss Williams's narrative months ago in that dialogue with Mr. Sa Ra Garvey. And that was just a throwaway comment, so he's probably forgot that he put that out in public record.
Investigating those same people, I'd found out that these gang people were active.
Another indication here is that when he uses the word gang, he corrects himself and replaces it with the word people.
These gang people were active.
So he's using a bit of ambiguity, but what he's doing is removing that explicit claim that it was a gang, changing it to people, which could also refer to non-related or individual cases, which was the case with those historic cases that the Barrow police picked up on. And it was actually 3 people doing our checks. 3 people, individual cases, not gang related. Mr. Robinson probably knows this deep down.
Gang people were active. That's not to deny that certain people's names have been destroyed in Barrow, who I believe, after looking through and researching, some of those names are innocent. It's not all that meets the eye with this with what's happening in Barrow.
This is quite problematic too. Mr. Robinson appears to be sympathetic to those who have been accused. He suggests folks have been falsely accused. This affects Ellie Williams' trial, as he's already publicly suggesting that she's falsely accused people. That's what you could potentially get reading between the lines here. In addition, him publicly saying he does not believe her grooming gang claims publicly impugns her honesty, which again can affect the trial. So he's got to be careful here. We genuinely believe Mr. Robinson turned up believing he could use the case to become relevant again, as he genuinely believed it had some legs, that the case or these claims had some legs, but he later lost interest when he found out the facts on the ground. The fact remains, according to Ellie's stepfather Ronnie, there's 5 named accused. 3 are British, indigenous Brits, and 2 are Asian. The only person charged, and I repeat this, the only person charged is Miss Williams. She's dealing with 7 charges of perversion of the course of justice, which includes falsifying evidence. She's actually now dealing with 8 charges, as only this week she was charged with another charge, another perversion of the course of justice charge. These are serious charges. This is no laughing matter. You want the courts and the legal system to make sure that this person gets a fair trial. If somebody is gobbing off online like Mr. Robinson to thousands, claiming to be a journalist, saying the things that he's saying, then he's going to affect Miss Williams's right to a fair trial. That's the reason why Mr. Robinson has been ordered to hand in his material. That's the reason why his material has been impounded, especially the interviews of the accused, as he no doubt has interacted with folks who are witnesses in the case against Ellie Williams.
I've just met that man. I feel for him so badly. You can't have false allegations against a man. That will destroy his life.
The gentleman who Mr. Robinson said he feels sorry for may well be one of those people, but we do know for a matter of fact that Mr. Rammy is another one of those.
So I'm in Barrow. Actually, so I'm at now. I've gone to Mo Rammy's.
I'm a witness in a case I can't say anything about, and anything else you want to throw at me. I've employed hundreds of people over the years.
So there you go. Obviously, Barrow police don't want Mr. Robinson releasing this type of footage from individuals who are witnesses to the case. You don't want them putting out public statements in regard to Miss Williams, and the police, Barrow police, can't trust Mr. Robinson to control himself and act in a fair fashion. So they've taken control.
I was taken to court. Crown Court, for a court order from Barrow Police, and it's a court order that would say that I have to hand over every single bit of recording I've got that I gained whilst investigating cases in Barrow.
So when Mr. Robinson tries to plant seeds of a cover-up conspiracy in your mind, you need to ask questions. You need to show a higher level of discernment, otherwise he'll carry on acting like this. The only way he's going to learn is for people who actually follow him to start questioning him and calling out his shenanigans for what they are. So that's going to take a bit of brain power and backbone. There's no cover-up whatsoever. If there was a cover-up, then Mr. Robinson is involved in that same cover-up. That's because he turned up in Barrow, did a bit of quote-unquote investigations, and ultimately walked away disbelieving Ellie Williams's account. On top of that, there was a 12-month investigation by the Barrow authorities which was independently reviewed.
But what I can say is that investigation then was subjected to an independent peer review in March this year. That review was conducted by subject matter experts nationally, qualified and experienced in investigating.
Where the independent reviewers were satisfied with the manner in which that investigation was carried out. The result of that investigation, it found no grooming gang activity in Barrow.
When the question is asked, is there an organised gang of Asian men in Barrow conducting abuse or otherwise exploitation against individuals, our investigation has shown that that has not been corroborated with otherwise evidence.
Look, it's easy to say there's a cover-up. I could literally sit here and say there's a grooming gang in Lisbon and the Lisbon police are covering it up. It does not make it true, does it? Somebody saying that does not make it true. You've got to be able to use a level of discernment. This is why real journalists like Amy Fenton never give their opinion, and they never try to do the job of the police or gonzo journalism, as they know that it would affect the case. Gonzo journalists like Mr. Robinson really need to stop acting like they're doing a better job than proper journalists like Amy Fenton. Amy Fenton, like her all over, just reports facts and she complies with reporting restrictions. That means she never becomes a hindrance. That's the type of journalist I would employ. So Mr. Robinson has some goal. He has some goal in calling out Amy Fenton a proper journalist.
Do you know anything about Amy Fenton?
In sum, Mr. Robinson has a history of affecting trials, so the Barrow prosecution took no chances and they gagged him. Well done to them. And they impounded his footage because they cannot trust him, nor can the general public trust him. Nobody can trust this man not to affect Miss Williams's trial negatively. I suspect he may have already done so, hence why the Barrow police and the Barrow authorities acted so swiftly in bringing him over.
Have now been given court orders to take every bit of footage that I got. I talk about, it's just like, really?
Just imagine the amount of police time and resources that was wasted. That's our taxpayers' money, all gone down the swanny just because Mr. Robinson was being selfish and foolish in his endeavours to gain online attention out of Miss Williams's case.
And not just whilst doing that, because I lost the case, I've got to pay £3,800 court costs.
Mate, you're not paying the court costs. The donation money is paying for all that. Let me repeat, the donation money pays for that. The fact that you squander so much of it on ill-advised endeavours and court fees just shows you have little respect for the free money which is given to you from poor people who have been gullible enough to be swayed into donating to you. They've donated their pension, their universal credit money, their wages to you, Mr. Robinson, and you are a poor custodian of their money. You're not responsible with it. That's not to mention your £1,000,000 house, all the holidays that you go on, and the fancy restaurants and the fancy clubber, including the Gucci shoes.
Pointed to Tommy's shoes and said, he's wearing Gucci something or other. He called them a name, a special name. And I just kind of looked blank at him. And he said, yeah, well, they cost, God knows, I think I don't know how many thousands of pounds they cost, but they cost a lot of money. I can't remember what he said now. And that didn't really affect me until I got home and I started putting two and two together and thought, yeah, you know, this guy is going around in Gucci slippers. He's wearing designer clothes, things that the average person can't afford.
At this ministry, we aim to train your powers of discernment so you can never be a victim of a PayPal patriot. So you can never be misdirected by attention seekers like this man. Subscribe and share so you can help us help the nation to rise up with greater levels of discernment.